I reached for my phone to check the time when I saw the text notification still glowing on my son's device. The one he'd left on my kitchen counter while using my bathroom. The preview message made my breath catch. Mom's such a burden. Honestly, world would be better if she just... My fingers went numb. The phone slipped through my grip and clattered against the tile floor. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. My knees buckled. I gripped the counter edge, feeling the cold granite bite into my palms as I steadied myself. The afternoon sunlight streaming through my kitchen window suddenly felt too bright, too invasive. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard, I thought I might collapse right there on the floor I'd mopped that morning. The floor of the house where I'd raised him, where I'd packed his lunches and nursed his fevers and celebrated every milestone. The toilet flushed down the hall. Water ran in the sink. I had maybe 30 seconds before he returned. My hands trembled as I bent down and picked up his phone, my arthritic joints protesting the movement. The screen had gone dark. I should have left it there, should have walked away. Instead, I pressed the button and watched it illuminate again. The full message thread loaded. My son's words to someone named Trevor filled the screen. Mom's such a burden. Honestly, world would be better if she just died already. Then I could sell this house and finally take that trip to Bali. My vision blurred. Tears I refused to let fall burned hot behind my eyes. I blinked them back, forcing myself to read the rest. Trevor had responded with a laughing emoji. My son had sent back, I'm serious though. She's only 65, but acts like she's 90. Always calling me for help with stupid stuff. I have my own life. The bathroom door opened. His footsteps moved down the hallway toward the kitchen. I placed the phone exactly where he'd left it, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly knocked over the glass of sweet tea I'd poured for him. 37 years I'd given him everything. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college. I'd helped with his wedding, babysit his kids every weekend for 5 years until his divorce. Last month, I'd loaned him $8,000 for his business that kept hemorrhaging money. I straightened up too quickly, and pain shot through my lower back. The kitchen counter steadied me as I gripped its edge, knuckles going pale against the dark granite I'd helped him pick out when he bought this house. My house, technically. The deed still had my name on it, though he'd been living here rent-free for 3 years while getting back on his feet. His footsteps grew louder. I forced my face into something neutral, something that wouldn't betray the earthquake happening inside my chest. The refrigerator hummed. Ice cubes shifted in the freezer with a soft, crackling sound. Normal sounds. Everything normal, while my world splintered apart. He walked back into the kitchen and grabbed his phone without looking at me. His thumb moved across the screen, typing something. Probably to Trevor. Probably laughing about the old woman making him lunch, playing the dutiful son while counting down the days until my funeral. Mom, you okay? I turned toward the stove where chicken sizzled in the cast iron skillet. The same skillet my mother had given me 40 years ago. 3 generations had cooked in this pan, and I'd planned to pass it to him someday. My hand reached for the wooden spoon, stirring vegetables that didn't need stirring. Fine, baby, just tired. The word baby tasted like poison in my mouth. I'd called him that since he was born. 9 pounds of squalling life that nearly killed me coming into this world. 37 hours of labor. An emergency C-section that left a scar across my belly like a fault line. I'd worn that scar like a badge of honor. He grunted and sat back down at the table. his attention already back on his phone. His shoulders hunched forward in that way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. I'd spent countless nights rubbing those shoulders when he was stressed about exams, about girls, about job interviews. My fingers knew every knot of tension he carried. The chicken started to burn. Smoke curled up from the pan, and I yanked it off the burner. My hands moved automatically, plating the food, adding rice, drizzling his favorite hot sauce the way he liked it. Muscle memory from thousands of meals prepared with love. I set the plate in front of him harder than I meant to. The fork rattled against the ceramic. Thanks. He didn't look up. My own plate sat across from him, but I couldn't eat. My stomach had turned to stone. I watched him shovel food into his mouth, scrolling through his phone with his free hand. Crumbs fell onto the screen. He brushed them off carelessly. The clock above the sink ticked. Each second felt like a small detonation. I'd bought that clock at a yard sale when he was 10, and he'd helped me hang it, standing on a chair while I steadied him, both of us laughing when we got it crooked the first time. I need to ask you something. He looked up finally, his brown eyes meeting mine. My eyes. He had my eyes, my nose, my stubborn chin. People used to stop us on the street when he was little, commenting on how much he looked like me. Can it wait? I've got a meeting in 20 minutes. His knee bounced under the table, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I used to think it meant he was excited about something. Now I wondered if it meant he was counting minutes until he could leave, calculating how much of his precious time I was wasting. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound cut through the kitchen like a scream. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to carry me to the counter where my purse sat. My fingers fumbled with the zipper. What are you doing? Getting something. Inside my purse, buried under receipts and old tissues and the pill organizer I filled every Sunday, I found my phone. The same phone he'd taught me to use, patient at first, then increasingly frustrated with my questions. It's easy, Mom. Just press the button. No, that button. God, how do you not get this? I pulled up my banking app. The login took 3 tries because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. His chewing sounds filled the kitchen, wet and rhythmic and suddenly unbearable. The account balance loaded. The $8,000 I'd sent him last month had cleaned out most of my savings. My Social Security barely covered my medications and the property taxes on this house. His house now, apparently, once I was dead and buried. I turned back to face him, the phone heavy in my palm like a stone I might throw. The morning light caught the screen, sending a glare across his face. He didn't look up from his plate. The fork scraped against ceramic as he scooped up the last of the eggs, and that sound, that mindless, entitled sound, made something crack open inside my chest. You remember when you called me 2 months ago? My voice came out flat, dead. Said you needed help with rent, or you'd lose your apartment? His chewing slowed. The fork paused halfway to his mouth. I sent you $4,000, cleaned out the account your father and I spent 30 years building. I moved closer to the table, my hip bumping the corner. The impact sent a jolt through my bad knee. Then last month, car repairs, you said. Another emergency. 4,000 more. He set down the fork, finally looked at me. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of shame. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by that same blank expression he wore when I asked about his day, his life, anything that required him to see me as more than an ATM in sensible shoes. I paid you back some of it. $600. The words tasted bitter. Over 2 months. My fingers tightened around the phone. The case dug into my palm, the edges sharp enough to hurt. Good. I wanted something to hurt that wasn't inside me, wasn't this crushing weight pressing against my ribs. I pulled up the text thread between us. My messages, long, rambling, full of questions about his life. His responses, single words. Busy. Later. Can't. And then, weeks of nothing until he needed something. The pattern stretched back months, years maybe. How had I not seen it? How had I convinced myself this was normal? That this was love? My thumb hovered over his name. One tap would call him. Make him explain. Make him apologize. Make him be my son again. The boy who used to wrap his small arms around my neck and tell me I was the best mama in the whole world. Instead, I set the phone face down on the table between us. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a judgment. There's something you need to see. I slid it toward him, the phone spinning slightly on the polished wood surface. But first, I want you to tell me the truth. His eyes dropped to the phone, then back to my face. The kitchen fell silent except for the drip of the faucet I kept meaning to fix, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breathing, sharp and quick and painful. What truth? His voice carried an edge now, defensive. Do you want me to die? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. His hand reached for his coffee mug, a mug I'd bought him last Christmas with "World's Best Son" printed on the side, and his fingers trembled just slightly before he gripped the handle. That's insane! He stood up fast enough that his chair rocked backward. I'm not doing this. I don't have time for whatever guilt trip. Pick up the phone. Mom, pick it up. My voice didn't shake. Didn't break. I'd used that voice when he was 16 and came home drunk, when he'd wrecked his father's truck, when he'd dropped out of college the first time. The voice that meant I wasn't asking anymore. His jaw clenched. A muscle jumped in his cheek. My father's gesture, passed down through generations. He reached for the phone, his movements stiff and jerky, like a puppet on strings. The screen lit up his face from below, casting shadows that made him look older, harder, like someone I'd never met. I watched his face as he read. His eyes moved left to right across the glowing screen, and I counted each second by the pulse hammering in my throat. The refrigerator kicked on with a mechanical whir. Outside, Mrs. Chen's dog barked twice, then fell silent. The color drained from his cheeks like water circling a drain. His lips parted. His thumb moved across the screen. Scrolling, I realized. Reading more. Finding the other messages I'd discovered at 3 a.m. when sleep had abandoned me completely. This isn't... He swallowed hard enough that I saw his throat work. This is out of context. I stood up. My knees popped, 65 years of wear and tear announcing itself. I moved around the table, each step deliberate, my slippers scuffing against the linoleum I'd mopped just yesterday. The same floor I'd mopped every Thursday for 40 years in this house. Show me the context, then. I held out my hand, palm up, steady as a surgeon's despite the fire coursing through my veins. He pulled the phone against his chest like a child protecting a toy. That gesture told me everything I needed to know, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I'd raised him to face consequences, to own his mistakes, to be a man who stood by his words, even when they burned coming out. I was venting to Derek. His voice pitched higher, defensive. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The medical bills, The calls from the facility about your blood pressure medication, I moved fast. Faster than he expected from someone he thought should just die already. My hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Not hard, but firm enough that he felt it. Firm enough that he remembered I'd worked double shifts as a nurse for 30 years, lifting patients twice my size, holding down violent drunks in the ER, standing on my feet for 16 hours straight. Don't. The word came out quiet, dangerous. Don't you dare make this about money. He tried to pull away. I held on. His eyes widened. Surprise, maybe. Or was it fear? Good. Let him feel something other than that casual cruelty I'd read in those messages. Let him see that the burden he wanted gone still had strength in her bones. The phone slipped from his other hand. It clattered on the table, spinning twice before settling face down. Neither of us looked at it. We stood locked together in the kitchen where I'd fed him breakfast before school every morning for 18 years, where I'd taught him to crack eggs and flip pancakes, where he'd told me about his first kiss, his first heartbreak, his dreams of becoming an architect like his father. Mom, you're hurting me. His voice cracked on the last word. I released him. He stumbled back against the counter, rubbing his wrist. Red marks bloomed where my fingers had pressed. They'd fade in an hour, unlike the marks his words had left on me. Your father would be ashamed. I said it softly, but the words hit him like a slap. I saw it in the way his shoulders jerked, the way his eyes went glassy. Don't bring Dad into this. He pushed off from the counter, suddenly aggressive. He's been gone for 10 years. 10 years of me handling everything alone while I what? I stepped toward him instead of away. While I lived? While I kept breathing? While I had the audacity to grow old? His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Not raised, not threatening, but coiled tight with frustration that had apparently been building for longer than I'd known. The morning light caught the gray in his hair. When had that happened? When had my boy turned into this stranger who typed those words to someone named Derek at 11:30 on a Tuesday night? You don't make it easy. His jaw set in that stubborn line I knew too well. Every week it's something. Your car broke down. Your sink is leaking. You fell in the grocery store parking lot. The neighbors called because you left your stove on. Once. My voice cut sharp as glass. I left the stove on once. That's all it takes. He jabbed a finger toward me, not quite pointing, not quite accusing. One time you forget, and the house burns down. One time you fall, and you break a hip. One time you take the wrong pills, and what? I die? Save you the trouble? The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush us both. Through the window, I saw Mr. Patterson from next door collecting his newspaper in his bathrobe. Normal Thursday morning, the world continuing to spin while mine fractured into pieces. The glass slipped from my fingers, bounced once on the linoleum, didn't break. Water spread across the floor in a widening pool that caught the morning light. Neither of us moved to clean it. His face had gone white, then red, color flooding up from his collar like mercury rising in a thermometer. The muscles in his jaw worked, but no sound came out. I'd finally said it, the thing we'd both been dancing around since I'd read those messages last night, since I'd seen those words glowing on his phone screen while he slept upstairs in what used to be his childhood bedroom. I bent to retrieve the glass. My knees protested, cartilage grinding against bone in that familiar way that had become the soundtrack of my 60s. The water soaked through my slippers, cold against the soles of my feet. When I straightened, he'd moved to the kitchen doorway, blocking my exit. Mom, I never meant. Derek seemed to think you did. I set the glass in the sink with deliberate care, keeping my hands steady through sheer force of will. Your friend Derek, who apparently knows all about what a burden I am. His hand gripped the doorframe hard enough to whiten his knuckles. He's not. It was just venting. Everyone vents. Do they? I pulled paper towels from the roll, the perforations tearing unevenly under my trembling fingers. Do they all wish their mothers would hurry up and die? I didn't say that. But his eyes shifted left, toward the living room where his phone sat charging on the coffee table. Evidence. 3 months of text messages I'd scrolled through in the dark hours before dawn, my reading glasses sliding down my nose while I discovered what my son really thought of me. I dropped to my knees with the paper towels. The floor was cold and hard. My joints screamed. I soaked up water in methodical swipes, pressing down until the paper turned translucent. Get up. His voice came from above me, tight with something that might have been concern or might have been embarrassment. You'll hurt yourself. Would that be so terrible? The words came out steady, but something dark pulsed underneath them. Speed things along for you? He crossed the space between us in 2 strides. His hands went under my arms, lifting with the kind of careful strength that made me remember him at 8 years old, helping me carry groceries. Back when I was strong. Back when he looked at me like I hung the moon instead of like I was a problem requiring solution. I wrenched away from his grip. My hip caught the edge of the counter, and pain shot through my pelvis like lightning. I didn't let it show on my face. Don't touch me. You're being ridiculous. But he stepped back, hands raised like I was something dangerous. Maybe I was. 3 hours of sleep and a heart full of betrayal could make anyone dangerous. I moved past him into the living room. His phone sat face down on the charging cable, innocent black rectangle that contained all his truths. I picked it up. The screen lit at my touch. No passcode because he trusted me, because he'd never imagined I'd go looking for reasons not to trust him back. Put that down. His footsteps behind me, quick and sharp on the hardwood. I held it up instead, thumb hovering over the Messages app. How long? My voice didn't shake. Small victory. How long have you been planning whatever this is? He lunged, not violently, not like he wanted to hurt me, but desperately like a man reaching for something precious falling off a cliff. His hand closed over mine, and we both froze, caught in this terrible tableau. Mother and son fighting over a phone at 7:30 on a Thursday morning while the coffee maker beeped its finished cycle in the other room. Since March. The admission came out strangled. Since you called me at 2 a.m. because you thought someone was breaking in and it was just tree branches on the window. I was scared. You're always scared. He didn't pull the phone away, but his grip tightened. Every shadow is an intruder. Every pain is a heart attack. Every memory slip is Alzheimer's. I can't keep living like this. The phone clattered to the floor between us. Neither of us had let go. We'd both just stopped holding on at the same moment. It landed screen up, display cracked in a spiderweb pattern radiating from the corner. Fitting. I bent to retrieve the phone, vertebrae in my spine crackling like bubble wrap. The cracked screen cast fractured light across my fingers as I swiped through his messages. My son backed away 3 steps, then 4, putting the worn leather armchair between us like a barricade. The first message thread made my stomach drop. Group chat labeled Exit Strategy. 5 names I didn't recognize, all discussing me like I was a problem requiring systematic dismantling. Someone named Trevor had sent a link to assisted living facilities in Arizona, far from here, far from the house I'd owned for 37 years. Another person, Bethany, had replied with laughing emojis and a comment about finally getting your life back. I scrolled further. My son's contributions peppered throughout. She called again about the thermostat. Found her at the neighbor's at midnight. Can't take another year of this. Each message a small knife, death by 1,000 cuts. Then I found it, the text that made my knees buckle. I grabbed the armchair for support, leather cold and slick under my palm. The message was time-stamped 3 days ago, sent at 11:40 p.m. when I'd already been asleep, when he'd thought himself safe to speak his truth into the digital void. Honestly, sometimes I think it would be easier if she just died already. At least then I could move on without guilt. The phone slipped from my fingers again. This time, I let it fall. It bounced once off the armchair cushion before sliding to the floor. Screen down now, hiding its secrets against the hardwood. My son's face had gone white, bloodless, like someone had opened a drain somewhere and let all the color run out. His mouth worked, but nothing emerged except a small, choking sound. He reached toward me, one hand extended, palm up in supplication. I stepped back. My hip caught the corner of the coffee table hard enough to send pain shooting down my thigh. The impact knocked over a ceramic mug, yesterday's tea, gone cold, and brown liquid spread across the white oak surface in an expanding stain. Neither of us moved to stop it. The tea dripped onto the carpet with soft, rhythmic patters that counted seconds. "I didn't mean," he started. "Don't." The word came out sharp as broken glass. I held up one hand, fingers splayed, a stop sign written in flesh and bone. My purse sat on the entry table where I'd left it last night after the grocery run. I walked toward it with measured steps, each footfall deliberate, controlled. My hands shook when I picked it up. Heavy leather worn soft from decades of use, but I didn't let him see. Keys jangled as I dug through the interior chaos of wallet and tissues and prescription bottles. "Where are you going?" His voice climbed an octave. "Mom, wait! We need to talk about this." "Now you want to talk?" I found the keys, closed my fist around them until metal bit into my palm. The pain helped. Something real, something immediate to anchor me while my world tilted sideways. 32 years I raised you, changed your diapers, walked you to school, sat through every baseball game, every parent-teacher conference, every scraped knee and broken heart. You want to talk now? The front door required both hands to open, old wood swollen from humidity, always sticking in the jamb. I threw my weight against it. The door gave suddenly, and I stumbled onto the porch, catching myself on the railing. Splinters drove into my palm, but I didn't stop moving. Behind me, footsteps. Quick, urgent. His hand caught my elbow and I spun, yanking free with enough force that he staggered backward into the doorframe. His shoulder hit with a hollow thud. "Don't touch me." The morning air hit my face, cool and damp with yesterday's rain still evaporating from the pavement. My car sat in the driveway, old blue sedan with rust creeping up from the wheel wells. I'd driven it for 15 years. Paid it off with money from 3 jobs after his father left. My son used to draw pictures on the dusty hood with his finger when he was small. I made it halfway down the porch steps before my chest tightened. Not pain exactly, but pressure, like someone had wrapped my ribcage in steel bands and started cranking. My breath came shallow and fast. The keys dropped from my hand, clattered down the concrete steps in a discordant musical scale. I bent to retrieve the keys, but my knees buckled halfway down. My palms slapped concrete, the impact jarring up through my wrists and elbows. Rough stones scraped skin. A warm trickle ran down my left hand, where the splinters had torn deeper when I caught myself. The keys lay 3 steps below, glinting in the morning sun that broke through the clouds. So close. I reached down with one hand, stretching until my shoulder joint protested with a grinding ache. My fingers brushed metal, pushed the keyring further away instead of grasping it. They tumbled down another step. Footsteps behind me. His shoes appeared at the top of my vision, those expensive leather ones I'd bought him for his promotion last year. $200 I'd saved up for 3 months. The shoes stopped 2 feet from where I knelt. "Mom, please, let me help you up." I pressed both hands flat against the concrete and pushed. My arms shook. 65 years of living, of working, of carrying groceries and laundry and everything else alone, all of it pressing down on my spine like iron weights. I got one foot under me, then the other, rising inch by trembling inch until I stood upright again. The neighborhood stretched out before me, same as it had for 30 years. Mrs. Chen's flower beds across the street, meticulously tended. The broken streetlight on the corner that the city never fixed. The oak tree I'd watched grow from a sapling into something massive enough to shade 3 front yards. Everything familiar. Everything suddenly distant, like I was viewing it through thick glass. I descended another step. My right foot caught on nothing. Empty air, my own clumsiness, the weight of exhaustion. And I pitched forward. My hands shot out instinctively, catching the iron railing before my face hit the steps. The cold metal bit into my palms right where the splinters had embedded. I tasted copper, realized I'd bitten my tongue. "For God's sake, stop!" His voice cracked. "You're going to hurt yourself." "Already hurt." The words came out thick, slurred around my swelling tongue. Blood pooled warm in my mouth. He moved past me, quick steps down to where my keys had landed. When he straightened, holding them in his fist, his face had changed. The mask he wore for work, for his colleagues, for strangers, it had cracked. His eyes were red-rimmed. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he couldn't spit out. I released the railing and grabbed for the keys. He pulled them back, held them high above his head like I was a child reaching for a forbidden toy. The gesture sent fresh rage burning through my chest, hot enough to momentarily override the exhaustion that had settled into my bones. "Give them to me. You can't drive like this." I lunged forward, got both hands on his wrist, and pulled down with all my weight. For a moment, we grappled there on the steps, locked in a struggle that would have been laughable if it wasn't so pathetic. Mother and son fighting over car keys like we were teenagers arguing over curfew. My foot slipped again. This time, there was no railing to catch. I went down hard on my hip, the impact shooting lightning up my spine and down my leg. Something popped, a sound more felt than heard, and sudden heat flooded my hip joint. The sky wheeled above me, patches of blue between gray clouds. A bird crossed my vision, dark against the light. I tried to rise, but my right leg wouldn't respond properly. When I moved it, white-hot pain exploded through my pelvis and down to my knee. His face appeared above me, eclipsing the sky. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't quite process through the roaring in my ears. His phone was out, pressed to his ear. I caught fragments. "Fell. Not moving right. Hurry." The ambulance arrived with sirens that split the quiet morning like an axe through wood. Red lights painted the neighbors' houses in urgent pulses. I lay on the concrete steps, the cold seeping through my clothes and into my bones, while strangers in blue uniforms descended on me with practiced efficiency. One of them knelt beside me, her gloved hands probing my hip with clinical precision. Each touch sent fresh waves of agony radiating through my pelvis. I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste copper. "Ma'am, I need you to stay still. Can you tell me where it hurts?" I didn't answer. My eyes tracked past her shoulder to where my son stood on the lawn, his phone still clutched in his hand. He was texting someone. Even now, in the middle of this disaster, his thumbs moved across the screen in quick, practiced strokes. His face held that familiar expression of mild irritation, like I'd inconvenienced him by falling, by requiring emergency services, by continuing to exist in his carefully ordered world. The paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher. The movement shifted something in my hip, and I couldn't stop the cry that tore from my throat. White spots danced across my vision. When they cleared, I saw him climbing into his sedan, engine already running. "Sir, are you following us to the hospital?" The paramedic who'd examined me called out to him. He rolled down his window just enough to answer. "I have a meeting. I'll come later." The window went up. He backed out of the driveway without looking at me again. His taillights disappeared around the corner before they'd even loaded me into the ambulance. Inside the vehicle, everything smelled like antiseptic and plastic. An oxygen mask pressed against my face. The IV needle slid into my arm with a sharp sting. Through the small window in the back doors, I watched my house recede. The home I'd worked 2 jobs to afford, where I'd raised him alone after his father left, where I'd nursed him through childhood illnesses and helped him study for exams and celebrated every achievement. The emergency room exploded with noise and harsh fluorescent light. Curtained bays held groaning patients. Somewhere a child screamed. Nurses rushed past, pushing equipment that beeped and hummed. They wheeled me into a bay and transferred me to a bed with rails that felt like cage bars. A doctor appeared, young enough to be my grandson, his face mostly hidden behind a surgical mask. He ordered X-rays. They wheeled me down corridors that all looked identical. Off-white walls, scuffed floors, signs pointing to departments whose names blurred together. The X-ray table was hard and cold. The technician positioned me carefully, adjusting my legs despite my gasps of pain. "Don't move!" The machine whirred and clicked. They took images from multiple angles, each adjustment of my hip sending fresh jolts of agony through my body. By the time they wheeled me back to the bay, sweat had soaked through my shirt, and my hands trembled from gripping the bed rails. The young doctor returned with films backlit on a screen. Even I could see the problem. The white lines of bone disrupted, fragments displaced. The ball of my femur no longer seated properly in the socket. "Fractured hip. You'll need surgery." More forms. More questions. Insurance information. I struggled to remember through the fog of pain and medication. They asked about next of kin, emergency contacts. I gave them his number, watched them note it down with efficient strokes of a pen. Hours crawled past. The pain medication they'd given me created a strange distance between my body and my mind, like I was floating slightly above myself. Through the curtain, I heard snippets of other people's emergencies. A man with chest pain, a woman who'd sliced her hand making dinner, someone's grandfather who'd stopped breathing in the night. My phone buzzed in the plastic bag containing my belongings. I couldn't reach it from the bed. A nurse eventually checked it for me, held up the screen so I could see. A text from him. "Surgery scheduled yet? Need to know timing for work tomorrow." Nothing asking how I felt. Nothing saying he was coming. Just logistics, schedules, the inconvenience of my broken body disrupting his carefully planned week. I stared at the screen until the nurse lowered it, her eyes avoiding mine. She tucked the phone back into the plastic bag, with practiced movements that suggested she'd witnessed too many moments like this before. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to breathe through the sensation, to push it down where it belonged, buried with all the other disappointments I'd collected over the past decade. The surgery happened at dawn. They wheeled me through fluorescent corridors that blurred together in my medicated haze. The anesthesiologist counted backward from 10. I made it to 7 before everything went black. Recovery stretched across 3 weeks in a rehabilitation center that smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. Physical therapists guided me through exercises that made my hips scream with protest. I gripped parallel bars with white-knuckled determination, forcing one foot in front of the other, while sweat dripped down my temples. The walker became my constant companion, its aluminum frame clicking against linoleum as I shuffled down hallways lined with other broken people, rebuilding themselves piece by agonizing piece. He visited twice. The first time he sat in the corner chair, checking his phone while I struggled to lift my leg against the resistance band. The second visit lasted 15 minutes. He paced near the window, complained about the parking situation, mentioned a project deadline 3 times. I watched him check his watch twice in 5 minutes before he invented an excuse and left. On the 4th day of the 3rd week, I sat in the common room working through range of motion exercises when the social worker found me. She pulled up a chair, her clipboard resting on her lap, her expression carefully neutral in that way medical professionals perfected when delivering unwelcome news. "We need to discuss discharge plans. You'll need someone at home, at least initially." My hands stilled on my knee. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. I knew what came next: the phone calls, the arrangements, the burden of my presence disrupting his life even further. That night, I lay awake listening to someone down the hall calling for nurses who moved with patient efficiency through the darkened corridors. My phone sat on the bedside table, screen dark. I picked it up, scrolled through contacts I hadn't called in months, years. Friends who'd drifted away when caregiving consumed my life. Neighbors I'd lost touch with after moving. Names that felt like relics from someone else's existence. The next morning, I asked the social worker about assisted living options. She returned with brochures featuring silver-haired people smiling over crafts and garden tours. I studied floor plans of studio apartments, calculated costs against my savings, measured my remaining independence in square footage and monthly fees. The phone call came that evening. His voice carried that tight quality that meant he was annoyed, but trying to hide it. "Mom, the social worker contacted me about discharge. Why are you looking at facilities?" I shifted against the pillows, my hip aching despite the medication. Through the window, I could see parking lot lights flickering on as dusk settled over the grounds. "I think it's time." Silence stretched across the line. I heard him breathing, heard the sound of traffic in the background, suggesting he'd stepped outside to make this call. "That's ridiculous. You're not that old. This is just temporary." My fingers traced patterns on the blanket covering my legs. The words I'd read on his phone, that accidental glimpse that had shattered something fundamental, echoed in my mind. But I didn't mention them. What would be the point? Confrontation wouldn't change what he felt, wouldn't transform obligation into genuine care. "I'm 65. My hip is held together with pins. I need help that I can pay for." "Mom? I've already toured 3 places virtually. There's one with an opening next month." The conversation ended shortly after. I set the phone down and watched darkness claim the parking lot completely, streetlights casting pools of amber across empty spaces. The facility I chose had wide hallways designed for walkers and wheelchairs. Staff who greeted residents by name. A small garden courtyard where I could sit when weather permitted. I signed papers with my lawyer present, arranged automatic payments, downsized 65 years of life into what would fit in 400 square feet. Moving day arrived with September rain drumming against windows. Professional movers handled boxes I'd packed with methodical precision. He showed up briefly, stood in my new studio apartment with his hands in his pockets while strangers arranged furniture. "You're really doing this." I lowered myself into the chair by the window, my walker positioned within easy reach. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the view of the courtyard below. "Yes." He left before the movers finished. I watched his car navigate the parking lot, taillights disappearing around the corner. My phone stayed silent for the rest of the day. 6 months later, morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting geometric patterns across my small kitchen table. I set down my coffee mug, ceramic, painted with sunflowers, purchased from the craft fair the facility hosted last month, and studied the canvas propped on my easel. Watercolors bled into each other, forming shapes that might become flowers, or simply remain abstract swirls of color. My hands moved steadily now, physical therapy having restored much of what I'd lost. Footsteps passed in the hallway outside. I recognized Loretta's distinctive shuffle, heard her greeting someone whose voice I couldn't quite place. The rhythm of this place had become familiar, woven into my daily existence like threads in fabric. My phone buzzed. A text from the book club. We'd reconvened our meeting time to Thursday evenings instead of Wednesday afternoons. I typed a quick confirmation, then set the device face down on the counter. The screen went dark. The courtyard called to me. I transferred my weight onto the walker, navigated through my apartment door with practiced ease. Staff members nodded as I passed, genuine acknowledgement, not the obligatory politeness strangers offer. Patricia worked the front desk, her reading glasses perched on salt and pepper curls. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" "Perfect for sitting outside." The automatic doors whispered open. Spring had transformed the courtyard from winter brown to vibrant green. Tulips lined the brick pathways, their petals catching light like stained glass. I settled onto my usual bench, positioning the walker beside me where it wouldn't block foot traffic. Birds sang in the ornamental trees. A fountain burbled somewhere to my left, water splashing against stone in endless repetition. I closed my eyes and let warmth soak into my shoulders, my back, my artificially reconstructed hip that ached less with each passing week. Voices drifted from the recreation center, someone leading chair yoga, counting breaths and gentle stretches. Last Tuesday, I'd joined them, discovered muscles I'd forgotten existed. The instructor, whose name badge read Carmen, had adjusted my posture with capable hands, praised my flexibility for someone recovering from injury. A car pulled into the visitor lot. I didn't look up immediately, too absorbed in watching a cardinal hop along the garden border. When I finally glanced toward the parking area, I recognized the sedan. My chest tightened, ribs constricting around lungs that suddenly needed more air. He emerged looking tired, shoulders hunched beneath a jacket too heavy for the weather. His gaze swept the courtyard, landed on me. Our eyes met across 20 yards of manicured grass and flowering shrubs. I turned my attention back to the cardinal. It pecked at something in the mulch, oblivious to human drama unfolding nearby. His footsteps crossed pavement, then quieted as he reached the brick walkway. I felt his presence before he spoke, the way you sense weather changing before clouds appear. "I've been calling." "I know." He sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining careful distance. I studied his profile, jaw clenched, fingers drumming against his knee, the same nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "You haven't answered." "No." Silence stretched between us, filled only by birdsong and distant laughter from the recreation center. I watched the cardinal fly away, red wings bright against green leaves. I wanted to explain. There's nothing to explain. My voice emerged steady, matter of fact. You felt what you felt, said what you said. His hand moved toward me, stopped midway. I was angry, stressed about work and Rachel's pregnancy complications, and I was a burden. I met his eyes directly, held his gaze until he looked away. You weren't wrong. I was struggling, needed help, couldn't manage alone anymore. Mom? I found the help I needed. I gestured around the courtyard, encompassing flower beds and fountain and the building behind us. This place works. I'm safe here. Getting stronger. He pressed palms against his thighs, fingers spreading wide. I should have been the one helping. Yes. The word hung between us, simple and unadorned. No softening, no excuse-making, no maternal comfort to ease his guilt. I'd spent 6 decades cushioning hard truths, smoothing over rough feelings, protecting him from consequences. That woman no longer existed. I'm sorry. I nodded once, acknowledging the apology without accepting or rejecting it. My hands gripped the walker's handles, preparing to rise. I need to go. Lunch starts at 11:30. Would you want me to visit again? I stood slowly, testing my balance, feeling the solid presence of aluminum beneath my palms. He remained seated, looking up at me with something that might have been hope or fear, or both tangled together. I don't know yet. Truth settled between us, honest and clean. I maneuvered the walker around his extended legs, headed back toward the building. Halfway there, I paused beside a bed of irises, their purple blooms nodding in the breeze. Behind me, I heard him stand, heard his footsteps retreating toward the parking lot. Inside, Loretta waited by the elevator, her expression curious but tactful. Everything all right? Yes. I pressed the button, watched numbers illuminate above the doors. Everything's exactly as it should be. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. We rode upward in comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who've learned each other's rhythms. My floor. The doors opened. I stepped out into the familiar hallway, sunlight streaming through windows at the far end. My apartment welcomed me back. Small, manageable, wholly mine. I hung my cardigan on the hook by the door, returned to the easel where watercolors waited. The painting needed darker tones, shadows to balance the light. I selected a brush, dipped it in indigo, let my hand move across paper with newfound confidence. Outside my window, life continued. Cars came and went. People walked dogs along sidewalks. Clouds drifted across the sky, casting temporary shade before moving on. I painted until lunch, then joined others in the dining hall where conversations flowed easily and no one expected anything beyond my presence. This was enough. I was enough. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.